just talking about Harold, I used to say, open the door. So I used to softly get up, open the door for Harold to come in.
What time was it? Like
2, 3 o'clock in the morning.
In Bradwell Road.
Yeah, and one day I tell you, I come out of my room and Mesh is fighting with Solly. He took a vase. He missed me by that.
Angry.
Mash.
He had temper.
How old were they then about? In their teens? Or younger?
Look, Harold just was finishing a trick.
Oh, so they were out of school already? And they were still fighting over
Of the other two, yes.
So this was when you arrived from France.
No,
And
that
you
was in
you stayed with them straight away.
Yeah, that's why I came to stay 3 months with my uncle.
And did they love you, the fathers? The brother?
Yes, I think so. I think so. Because,
Yeah.
you know, look, I came here, it didn't bother them or anything. No. But I got on quite well with Harold, with all his funny ways.
Who was closest in age?
It was Mesh, she was my age. Mesh was my age, Solly's 2 years older. And I got on with both. But Mesh was very, I think, a little bit unbalanced, if you ask me. And protected by his mother, so she was her baby. And Solly, of course, was the apple of my uncle's eyes. And Rebecca was the lady that met me in London. Wow, that was another story.
Oh,
What do you
really?
mean? What do you mean she met you in London?
With Dennis, they met me at the airport. We came back by ship.
In the beginning?
I came from France and
to London.
to London. And we were leaving from Southampton.
Did they come with you by ship?
Yeah. First class,
they came
and I
by
was
ship?
economy.
Oh shit. Did you see them on the way?
Sometimes. But I was so lucky because I met 3 French young men who took me under their wing.
Oh, they must
Boy,
have
I
loved
was
you.
like the queen. I had such a time.
So what, was that the first time you came?
Yeah,
What year was it?
54.
But was it on purpose that they met you in London?
No, he was
they
on
just happened to
business.
be there.
I stayed 2 weeks with him in Cumberland in that hotel.
Cumberland? Didn't we once stay in the Cumberland?
It's a great company.
Because every South African stayed there.
Near Marble Arch there.
Yes.
Oh, we stayed there.
But can you imagine?
Many
Now,
years later.
she goes shopping with me to have, you know, whatever we needed. Now, she was really madame. And she used to phone me and say, right, we're going to the theatre now. Can you imagine? What do I understand about the theatre? Laurence Olivier and Vivian Lee taking me, I never forgot the play, The Deep Blue Sea. I couldn't understand a word, so I was looking at her legs. She had legs like poles. She was gorgeous, but big legs.
Was,
Vivian Lee. do
but
you
was
know?
Laurence Olivier in the play?
It was The Deep Blue
What
Sea
beautiful.
in the theatre. But what did I understand? Nothing. So, but it was fun because they taught me to drink gin and tonic. Can you imagine? I think it was 53. Oh, not 54. Turned 54 late.
Sure. So, you flew, did you fly to London?
I flew to London from Marseille. And
Was it because Joseph had invited you?
Yeah, he bought me a ticket to meet the family. You know, when he found us, I was 14, just after the war. He came to France to see my mother. They hadn't seen each other for 50 years.
For how long?
50.
50.
It can't be 50. Can it be?
Yeah, she left. She was 8 years old. And she stayed with an uncle of hers and she only went back to see her parents when she was 17. And that was the brother of our grandmother, who had no children. And she was the only daughter with 5 sons. So they gave that daughter to my grandmother's brother. They put her on a train, 8 days, an 8-year-old kid.
By herself?
By herself. From Lithuania to the Crimea. And she managed.
Where's the Crimea?
It's opposite Turkey,
Oh.
the Black Sea.
Mm.
You know?
What would that be now
Ukraine.
today? Oh, the Ukraine?
Ukraine.
Oh, Ukraine.
Yeah. And so she was brought up by that uncle. And when she went back, she was 17. And your Zadis used to say to me, you know, they were so poor. And she arrived dressed like a princess. They used to be in awe in front of her. And that was the first time she saw her parents and her brothers and sister. Brothers, no sister. And she went and she never saw them again. And the one brother, the one that came from Russia to France to meet them, they didn't see each other 50 and 60 years.
Phew.
They didn't recognize each other.
Sure, 50 years is a
You
lifetime.
50 years. 51, he's 51 years.
Can you imagine?
No.
And they crossed each other on the stairs, and the Russian one said, look, and he said, Sima, is it you? He couldn't believe it. Old woman, and he left a young girl.
Is it Zeta and Tante Simon now?
That's my,
Yeah.
it was the only sister, you see.
So how did he find? How did he get across that from South Africa?
From, you mean,
When you the first time they met after 50 years
yeah, he came up,
by boat.
no, that was your Zeta.
Yes.
He came by plane to London,
Oh.
and then took a train to France. He was a good traveller, he knew exactly. And
Like Dad.
yeah, he was a very, capable. And then as I walked in, I never forgot, he was in the dining room. I walked in and he started to cry. So my mother said, why are you crying? He said, this is my mother walking. Apparently I look like my Boba.
Oh, really?
Oh, shame.
Even Auntie Vivian said to me, you look just like your Boba. So they were very, he was very moved.
Sure.
So. And of course, afterwards, he said to me, I want you to come to Cape Town. But I first finished, whatever I was studying. And he sent me a ticket, £70 it cost, from Southampton back
On the
A
boat.
return.
on the return.
£70.
How long was the return valid for? Because you stayed for a year.
No, I stayed for 3 months.
3 months the first time.
First time, and after that, he said, just try and stay a little longer. I think they had something
They had a
in their
plan
head.
for you.
A plan, yeah.
Definitely.
What do you mean? They sent me to Johannesburg to, what was her name? Sylvia Katz, Saw girls.
Sylvia
Was she
Katz.
the Shadchan there?
Yeah, they sent me to the best hairdresser, dressed me up, and one after the other introduced me all these smart boys, wealthy, horrible boys.
Yeah.
One
Joburg
worse
Joburg
than
boys.
the other.
Joburgers. Oh, that's
Funny. No, I didn't like it.
And then how did you meet Uncle Louis?
That is another story. I'll tell you what happened. Your father was going out with your mom, but of course it was forbidden.
On the sly.
So we were invited to marriage, to somebody's wedding, and he said to me, "You're coming with me." And at the wedding, he dumped me with some boys, and he disappeared. He went to meet Gwen. Well, I knew already. I want to tell you.
You met her?
No.
Oh, you hadn't met her
Not.
yet.
No. I didn't know.
Mm.
I didn't know anything. What did I know? And it was quite amusing because, you know, I used to have every night a new chap taking me out.
I'm sure.
Mm.
I was popular, but they fooled French girls.
Mm.
You know, immediately they put their hand on your knee.
Yeah.
I mean,
They thought it was easy meat.
Romantic.
easy meat.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you imagine coming with? We used to go dancing. We had a chaperone because I belonged to a Jewish youth, and we used to go dancing from 7 o'clock until 6 in the morning.
In this old drill hall.
No, in
Oh, in
France.
France.
In France.
France. And we had a
What,
chaperone.
7 till 6 in the morning?
Yeah, we never stopped.
Jeepers.
Oh, dancing was my passion.
And they didn't even eat drugs in those days.
Yeah, the beginning of the rave parties
No,
emanated from France.
nothing to eat, nothing. We never stopped.
And to drink?
No.
Gin and tonics? No.
No, in France.
Nothing.
Who knew about gin and tonic in
She was
France?
introduced to gin and tonic in
Oh,
England.
with
In
England.
England.
With Auntie Rebecca, yeah.
Then I met society, my dear. So she used to phone me more, saying what I must wear and what did I understand on the phone. Her English,
Who's
my
this?
English,
Rebecca?
Rebecca,
When you're now in South Africa,
in London.
I took take for the
I
meeting,
stayed
yeah.
2 weeks
Yeah.
with them in London. I didn't know what she was saying. Lucky I didn't come in pyjamas.
Yeah. So,
But anyhow, that is. And then, of course, I met Louis at the wedding,
okay, that's
at that famous
when
wedding.
Solly
That
absconded.
wedding.
When
At
Solly
that-
absconded.
At that wedding, and I met his sister, you know, and I think he was a bit drunk, and he asked me to dance. I didn't like him at all, not at all. Didn't think he was good looking or anything. In any case, I didn't want to stay in that Dorp, Cape Town. My mother used to send me a lipstick in a magazine because I couldn't even find a magazine, a lipstick. It was Cape Town in '53. Was backwards, huh?
That's interesting, yeah.
Backwards. It was unbelievable. They
And
used to,
clothes and that? Terrible.
they used to go Saturday morning at
Stutterford's.
Waldorf, because there was music, and dressed in taffeta and long gloves like that in the morning
Where was Waldorf?
in St. George's Street.
Oh,
And all those googles was dying. And I used to just listen if I could hear French. And if I did, I went to the people and said, "Are you French speaking?" And I met a lot of people like that.
yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. I met very good friends.
So there were French people speaking? And you met them there?
Swiss, Belgium. I had the guts because I was so desperate, you know. So I didn't like any of those boys. Anyhow, Louis phoned me a few days later and he said, "You know, I met you, can I ask you out? Were you wearing a yellow dress?" Now, you must never pronounce yellow because I hate yellow.
I also don't like yellow. It's my least favourite colour.
So he said, "You were you wearing?" I said, "Oh no, you've got the wrong girl, I'm sorry.
What?
I was wearing blue."
He must have been very
He
drunk.
was drunk.
He must have been very drunk.
Oh, hysterical.
But my uncle made me promise I would try. I think he promised my mother
Mm.
to make something. He was hoping because I was not interested. But, you know,
What were you, like 21 or something?
I was not not even 20. I was not even 20.
It's young.
I was very young,
You're a teenager still, 19.
but I was mature.
You've been through a lot.
I threw a lot and I was very mature. Mature but naive. Because in those days, you know, the girls didn't...
Well, if you hear the story on the DVD leading up to this, you'll understand why you were naive in that kind of way,
Yeah.
but mature in what you had
oh my
endured
God.
with
Oh my God.
the hectic things.
So I think you better ask me questions because I don't know how to start.
I'm a bit confused about that, when you said they were 50 and the parents when they met.
50 years
Okay.
apart.
No, when they met after 50 years.
Because my mother was 17 the last time he saw my mother.
Yes,
And-
his sister.
Yes.
Yes.
And they saw when Michel took your grandfather to France. He already was nearly 70.
Yeah.
He was he
Do you
had had a
understand?
stroke.
No, I'm confused.
But I thought...
We're skipping out something.
Yeah, Tante Simon stayed here for a while. I remember going to visit
Yeah, but
her.
it wasn't your grandfather. It was the one from Russia.
But your mom, Tante Simon,
Yeah, she
lived here
yes,
by the bowling green.
Michel.
Yes, with Michelle.
But it wasn't your grandfather that didn't recognize my mother. It was the one from Russia.
The one that's what they hadn't seen each other for 50 years.
That's your oldest brother.
Not my
Oh,
brother.
no.
It was
Joseph's oldest brother.
Yeah.
a younger one, I think.
Oh, younger.
I think.
But Joseph and Tante Simon had seen each other regularly, hadn't they?
Not regularly, but she came twice here. When Raffaella was born, when you were born.
Yeah, but they didn't have a 50-year gap.
No.
Yes, it was the Russian brother that they found in Russia.
Oh, I vaguely remember something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, they found him.
Yes,
And they
I remember I
brought
was
him.
young and then
But
everyone
you
was so
know-
excited.
But he didn't come here, they went to meet in France, eh?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Michel took your grandfather, who already had a stroke.
Yes.
He
That's
wasn't quite well.
Yeah.
And, well, there, it was very strange. And the two brothers hadn't seen each other for I don't know how long. Don't know how long.
Yeah. Were you there?
No,
Were you here?
I was here.
Yeah.
Michel was there.
Yeah.
So it was Michel, Joseph, and the Russian brother met.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
Tante Simon.
And my sister and my brother Leon.
That must have been hectic.
But that Russian brother was in the Soviet army. He was one of the 5 Soviets that put the Russian flag on top of the Brandenburg Gate in Berlin.
Really? And they liberated
I didn't say it the other day because I have German friends.
Yeah.
And he went around.
And you worked at the German school.
Yes, but it didn't matter.
I know,
that.
you said that. You said
It doesn't matter,
Yeah.
but my friend, I didn't want to offend
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
my uncle was one of the Russians. You know how they felt.
So he was in the advance, right in the front, eh?
He was.
The front
And he
one.
was wounded in the lungs. That's why he couldn't fly. He could only come by train from France,
Oh, really?
from Russia.
Yeah.
He went, when he was in Berlin, he went to clothing factories and took all the machine needles he could find, took them back to Russia, built himself a house with the money.
that he sold from the needles.
Yeah.
My goodness.
Enterprising.
It opens with something.
Yeah.
I want to tell you.
But all related to clothing. It's interesting, eh?
Yeah.
Look,
so,
our grandfather was a tailor, and they were all tailors,
yeah.
all of them. And I think your grandfather was a rotten tailor, that's why he made money. You always said so. He didn't like it.
Yeah.
Is the
But
battery running low, lovey? Do we have a little break?
yeah, there is fruit salad with that, what do you call that? Definitely. So I think what you should do is actually ask, you should ask me a question. First of all, you want to hear about
Uncle
Uncle
Michel.
Michel.
Uncle
Well, when
Michel.
you came
Yeah.
to South Africa, when Zayda brought you
Yeah.
to South Africa, you'd just finished school.
I finished actually my
You
studies.
finished studying.
Yes.
And where was Michel all this time then?
In Dakar. He was in Senegal.
Yeah, what did he go do there?
He couldn't find work, in
France after the war.
After the war. So he worked for a general store in Marseille, and then he found a job as a manager in Dakar for huge general store.
Okay.
And then came the liberation for them. They call the independence. And you know, in the bush, Michel used to say, the blacks didn't know what liberation was. They used to think it was something you ate.
Yeah.
They had no clue because they were really in a jungle, you know.
Yeah.
But how did you end up in Senegal?
That's in the 1950s.
That's in the bush. But he lived in Dakar.
Work took him there, he found work.
In the 50s.
Yes,
Yeah.
after the...
Okay.
And he had a good life there. I mean, she
Yeah.
went and they had a holiday. Every 2 years they could come back for 4 months.
So this was all after the whole resistance thing?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and I was just wondering where he was when he came to the factory, but I suppose
Well, let's start at
Dakar.
the beginning though, with joining the resistance maybe.
Okay, all right. What you want to know is, of course, that night when, you know, the area was totally closed for 10 days at least before they start to get people.
Yeah, just when the Germans came to round you up. And the
That's
year
right.
was?
43. It was
43.
January 43.
So it was close to the end of the war.
No, it was a beginning for
For France.
South.
Okay.
Because there was
It's only
the
two,
north,
when I say close to the end, I mean relatively speaking, there's only 2 years left of the...
but even 2 years of
Yeah.
hell.
Yeah.
Each day was a century.
Yeah.
Unbelievable century. And, you know, till 1944, people were sent to the concentration camps and never came back. I knew a lot of my friends who had their parents caught. In hiding, they caught them and sent them to the camps and never came back. So 45 was a liberation, but they still collected people.
Yeah.
See? So in that, you see, France was divided in two, the north and the south. Paris was where they rounded most of the Jews, and then the people started coming to the south, going toward those who had money, going to Portugal, to Switzerland, to wherever they could escape, and they came through the south. So my parents actually had people, they had lots of friends in Paris, because my parents actually had a very international circle. As I told you before, actually my father was really somebody. And, but you know, she was the one that managed to earn the money. My father was just the intellectual, and well, that's another story. But he was an extremely proud man, because as a kid he stood, you know, 5, 6, you can't play with that child because you know where you come from, you know who you are. So it was totally no. So I played by myself all the time, because my brothers were old, and my sister also.
So when you were 8, in the story you were telling the other day, and they came and took your father away, was that the last time you ever saw him?
Of course. So I'll
But
tell you what happened.
You went down to Marseille then, from Paris?
No, we
originally?
didn't
Were you
go
always
to-
there? In the south?
We were living in Marseille,
Oh.
in that area. But friends of my parents
Came down from
came
Paris to
down
escape the...
and wherever, you know, wherever you could, there were sleeping people that were coming to my parents, because the south was still open.
Yeah.
But then suddenly they closed. And I've got a photograph as a little girl when they're marching in the main street, the army, the German army, marching. I'm walking with my sister, and with their boots, they're marching down Marseille, the main road. And then I was 7. And you know, a serious face and a child. Somebody said to me, God, you were not a smiling child. My God, can you imagine the fear of that?
What
with
do you
this-
smile about?
the German army.
Yeah.
Well, anyhow, so they encircled the area. You couldn't come in, you couldn't come out. And people had been asked to have their papers stamped due. So my father never believed, because they were French, naturalized French. They were in France since 1922, beginning of 1922. So, you know, he thought French Jews won't be touched.
Yeah.
Believe me, they didn't stop there. So they came at midnight, they rang the bell, and they knocked, rather, and my father opened. But that night, I remember so clearly, my father knew what was coming. Yeah, they had heard. He gave his gold watch to Leon, his wedding ring, and he was preparing himself. Somehow, you know, he knew that, you know, things were bad. And Michel and Leon slept upstairs, like another little apartment. And they said to my father, you get dressed. You alone get dressed. And my father had a bit of money on him, but he had false teeth, and my mother said to them, it was a Frenchman, the Germans were outside, huh? Not, that was French. And my mother said, please, just wait, I give him false teeth. Don't worry, we'll give him mashed potato. So they took my father to the police headquarters, and my sister stood at the window screaming. Can you imagine the police then collecting my father, the Lord? And they said to her, you know, go in or we'll shoot you. So she went in. But when Michel heard that my father was going down with the police, he wanted to go follow my father.
Yeah.
So
How old was Michel then?
18.
18, so he was 10 years older than you, almost. Yeah.
And my mother slapped his face and she said, you stay behind because they'll take you too. And you see, when they knocked upstairs, they didn't answer the door, so they didn't get. But, you know, it was very interesting because after I studied the whole thing, I found out why next door they took the mother and daughters, the others one, they only took one brother, and so on at random. Because the next morning at 6 o'clock, there was a loudspeaker in the street, and they said, everybody must come down with as much as you can carry, and everybody came. And that was a scene I will never forget. I told you the other day.
Movies.
You know, some people had dogs, some old people had chickens and things. They brought things, and then they stayed. You can't bring that, you can't bring that. And they rounded us on the square. And they kept us the whole day, hounded that square. And you know, I was very ill. I had just had my tonsils out without anesthetic. Just tonsils and adenoids. And I was feverish and bleeding. And it was a miracle that you know. So they kept us there. The coldest, 43 was one of the coldest winter of the century. And it was 23rd of January, now by then 24, and they marched us to a station to, you know, I don't know what you call these wagons, this famous animal thing. And they pushed women and children in one and men in another. Michel and Leon went in another. And I went with my sister, my little brother. He was 4. And they made...
What was your little brother's name again?
Armand. And I tell you, we were like sardines in there. The smell, no food the whole day, nothing. And I think I need something because my throat's a bit dry. So we were taken to that and pushed in there. And you know, details that are so much in my head, my nose.
Like a vinegar hair.
the vinegar. You know that neighbor of ours, she was Italian, and she had me on her lap. My head on her lap, and her hair was smelling of vinegar, because she was, and that smell of vinegar makes me gag.
Do you never use vinegar?
Well, I use vinegar, yes, but you know, it's just horrible. And they took us to a transit camp that was a Senegalese army camp, just discarded, and they put us there on the floor, straw, infested with vermin. We were covered in lice, in cockroaches running everywhere. That's why I have such a fear of cockroaches. And the cold, there were no doors, so the draft, the wind, the icy cold. So my sister was sleeping on the floor there, I there, little Armand there, and my mother, trying to keep us warm, because it was terrible, that cold. And whatever we could, you know, we didn't have such a lot of warm clothes. So they kept us there for a while. Michel and Leon were the men in another side of the camp.
Yeah.
You never saw them?
Never saw them. No. My mother didn't know what happened.
You didn't even know they were there.
Didn't know.
They could have been anywhere.
So absolutely. Because, you know, when we came down on that square, they managed to, the men and women, separate. And then we stayed a while, not terribly long there, but they said, they announced, because don't forget, they were not only Jews, but why they didn't collect everybody, all the Jews, is because they didn't have time to collect everybody. And they knew that the next day they would net the rest.
Yeah.
You were trapped. So then they didn't worry about, they collected the father, the brother, the sister, didn't matter. Because the next day you would get the rest. You know? So we stayed there, and they announced those who can have a place to go, because then by then they have raised to the grounds the apartments. There was nothing left.
Destroyed your houses.
Completely. I had a book. I think I took it to the Holocaust Center. I think they lost it. It was a very, very special book. I don't know what happened. Photographs taken by journalists that managed to sneak in and take photographs. Well, I don't know if I found it again. I don't know. Well, so they said, if you have a place to go, you can go. And these neighbors of my parents, they had like, you know, I'm sure you've seen them on the railway line. They've got like pieces of gardens with a little hut, little plot where they keep rabbits, or they grow a few tomatoes, salads, or whatever. Yeah. And they said to my mother, if you want, we'll hide you in there. But now we've got to go through the guards with our papers, Jew stamped on the papers. So when we're queuing, and you know this is extraordinary because I was only 8, but I have a movie in my head. I see every scene. It's incredible. I just remember how the man looked at my mother, looked at her papers, looked at that, turned it, he said, go. Bert, Armand and I let us through.
They turned a blind eye.
Let us through. Because those that he collected went to the camps.
Yeah.
Never came back. So, you know.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. How? And I mean, I told you the other day how, why, all my life I wondered why did I survive all these stories, because I need to talk about it. Because I think the few of us that are left, we are the last witnesses of what happened.
Exactly.
It's absolutely essential. As much as I hate talking about
That
it,
is wonderful that you're talking about it.
but I have to do it. I
Otherwise
made it a
it's just
mission.
in books, and then the book is
Yeah.
not the same as hearing it from somebody
Of
who was
course.
there.
If you just read the history of the 100 Years' War, it means
It's
nothing.
meaningless. Yeah, it's a story.
It's a story.
Schoolbook, textbook.
It's a textbook, you see, and that's what will happen to our children.
Yeah.
And I think it's important. Gina will have to know, and whoever, they have to know
Yeah.
what happened to our families.
I know. So now we want to know about Uncle Michel.
Okay, so they
So he
took-
was taken away.
Oh, wait,
separate-
so did the girl hide you in
Oh,
the
yeah,
house
yeah,
and
yeah,
stop for a
yeah.
second?
Okay, so we are now going with these people. To tell you the truth, I don't remember how we got to that little hut. There was no water, but I do remember them making a fire outside, because whenever I smell fire, smoke, you know, actually it's good for me, because then I suddenly feel I'm out of the camp.
It's a comforting feeling.
I love the smell of a fire, wood fire. Anyhow, so she took, they hid us there. My mother, the first thing she did, she cleaned us up, because we were covered right around, big lice. The head, she threw petrol on our head. It was unbelievable, burning, I can't tell you. Well, now we still don't know where Michel and Leon are. What happened to them is they did put them on a train towards camps, and Michel, being who he was, pushed Leon out of the train and jumped. Could have got killed on the spot, because it was, you know, ditches and thing. And they ran and they managed. Leon was not like that. He was not daring. Michel was daring. He was an adventurer. Right? And he immediately went to some friends in Marseille. They walked and managed and joined. They put in contact and joined the underground. And immediately from there, he was in the underground. So from there, he actually somehow organized what would be doing with us. But, you know, I must tell you that Leon was engaged to my sister-in-law, just passed away 3 weeks ago.
What a shame.
Yeah. She went the next day to the house and took photographs. She took, I've got 2 handkerchiefs that my father's mother embroidered for my mother's wedding. She took a Bible where the names were written, you know.
Sorry, this was the day after they had been taken away in the beginning, before they
Next
burnt
day
the
or a
house.
few days later?
No,
The
this
day
is the
after
way
they
after.
took us,
Oh.
she
Yeah.
went, but she couldn't carry all that much. So she took photographs and things. That's how I've got photographs. And my grandmother's mantilla, pure lace, my father's mother, I still got. All right. The next day she went, there was nothing left. Nothing left. Not even, and I remember that it impressed me, not even the copper tip they had pulled out. And a few days later they raised the whole area to the ground. So if anybody had been hiding, like somebody told my mother, hide your husband, he's in danger. He went and hid in the shops. You know, my parents had a few shops. And at 9 o'clock he came back, and my mother said, what are you doing here? And he said, if they don't find me, they will take you and the children. So he came back, and he was right. So then Michel went straight to join the underground. He knew a lot of people. Michel always knew a lot of people.
Yeah.
He was a very popular man, and Then they organized, my sister-in-law, the one that just died, she had an aunt that was very wealthy, and she was a widow, living in a castle, a real castle, I must say. There were a few in very beautiful areas. And she said, well, my sister also went to join the underground. And my mother, Armand, and I went to stay and look after that woman who was dying of cancer. The most scary time I had, told you.
In the castle.
In that, you know, it used to be those big staircase. And she had a portrait that was twice as high as this of her husband. Every time I went down, I mean, it was a little girl. I thought that man's jumping on top of me. I was terrified. And I didn't know what was going on. Nobody ever said to Armand or I, what's happening? They're just taking us, and hiding and scared and alarm and loudspeaker, but we don't know what's going on.
No one ever the whole time explained anything to her?
Nothing, ever. So, do you know how much I love animals? I would go anywhere to save a squirrel. Where I used to go, she had rabbits in cages. I used to sneak there and pull a handful of fur of the rabbits. It used to be so angry, so angry. When I think of it, I'm so ashamed. Well, we stayed a little while there, didn't last. One night, I know, we moved, always at night, along the walls, and then you had to listen if there were steps behind, and they took us to a village that was the German cavalry. The German cavalry had requisitioned, they'd taken that entire village. In the meantime, we didn't know what happened to Michel or Leon and my sister. They just disappeared out of the blue. And, my mother didn't look Jewish at all, nor did I, nor did Armand. And the Germans used to think that actually Armand was the child that she had with a German. Mm-hmm. He was a white blonde, blue eye, white blonde, and so they used to play, but they were not the Nazis nor the SS, they were the army. Big difference, huh?
Yeah.
Very big difference. They were very ordinary people that used to show us photographs of their children and so on.
Yes.
And they used to lift Armand, put him on a horse and play. Well, didn't
They only knew.
That's right, if only they knew.
Yeah.
Then they sent me to school. Now, I adopted a little black cat, and that little black cat used to fetch me at 11 o'clock at school. He used to wait for me. I loved that little animal. And, he followed me everywhere. Then I've befriended the little kid at school, and she said, I've got a secret to tell you. Yes, my mother's Jewish. God, the world? Because by then, we have different papers. I'm not Helene Mendel anymore. I'm Helene Arnaud, which is a very French name. Thank God I didn't have Rahmil or something, but that was French name. And I said, well, I'm also Jewish, we're also Jewish. That night, they came and told my mother, you're leaving, you've been reported.
Yeah.
We leave the child.
And my tragedy was my cat. I had to leave that little black cat. And he went under a door, like a hanger, and he wouldn't want to come out. And in any case, I couldn't take him with.
Yeah.
So, terrible. Another thing I had forgotten, a child is a child. I had a little doll like that, all dressed. And in that square, when they rounded us up, I held that little doll, and it dropped. And somebody walked on it, squashed it. And I cried, I can't tell you. I had my baby on the floor and I couldn't take it. So that was my cat, my doll.
You lost a lot.
All the important
I
things for a little
started to
child.
lose all the time. To so much that all my life I was afraid to love because those I loved would disappear, would leave me. That affected me a great deal.
Okay, I'm going to have to stop.
Right? Okay. So from that village, that was the beginning where Armand and I were taken out completely somewhere in the mountains. My mother hidden somewhere else. She let us go.
Well, because of innocent childhood conversation.
Yeah. Sharing a secret.
Sherry, I trusted her. Do you know that on the whole, I don't trust anybody? Because I
You could have
felt
actually all died because of that.
I put everybody in
Yeah.
danger. Yeah. So they took us to that and we stayed 2 years, Armand and I.
In the mountains.
Yeah. And there, from time to time, and now I realized, Michelle used to send me postcards. They are somewhere, I don't know where.
Oh, so you made contact in the interim?
No. But he knew where we were.
Oh, okay. 'Cause
He organized, he put us with the in-laws of the chief of the underground.
Okay.
And the chief of the underground had a wife with 2 little children, a little baby and a little girl, Agnes and Helene. I remember the name. Can you
Okay,
imagine?
so you were being watched by Big Brother.
So it's
literally.
like a guardian angel watching over you.
You've been watched by
It's-
Big Brother, literally.
Yeah.
Absolutely. He knew. My mother didn't know. My mother didn't know where we were. She had no idea. She was put somewhere. But, it was a place where the British used to parachute the arms for the underground. So what they used to give me to unpick the parachutes. And, imagine an 8.5, 9-year-old kid do that and give me papers to deliver someplace because one of the underground men had no papers and the Germans were around, so they said, look, they won't question a child, so I am on my way by myself with the papers, and there was, the river, there was the house on top, between 2 k's away from any other house. There is the road, the river, and around and from far I see a German convoy. And I thought, I can't go on the road because if they catch me, maybe I speak out of turn. I already thought, it's dangerous. So I crossed the river. I had water right up to there.
The papers waterproofed or held
No,
on?
I held the papers and I managed to deliver the papers. And it was fine, and the Germans, of course, never saw me.
You were 9 years old.
And you still never knew Michelle was
No.
orchestrating most of this?
No.
So you didn't even tell your mother, even though she didn't know what happened?
She
because
couldn't.
Because he couldn't compromise himself.
He couldn't, because I saw in his papers that he was a lieutenant or officer in the intelligence. And he used to put bombs in the railway lines and things. He was wounded, He was wounded in the hand. And, life was terribly hard because there was no water in that house and no food. So I used to scratch in the fields. If I could find any turnips that they give the cows, I used to wash it, grate on my teeth, that it would last longer because I was starving all the time. And I had my little brother that was always scared. I mean, he was 4.5. And where's mommy and where's daddy, So I used to say, don't worry. And I took him around and I was a little mommy that looked after him. And you know what I do remember? I had to go and break the ice in the river to carry water up there. I used to wash in that ice water in the river, cut wood, carry it on my back, saw with somebody else, put traps to catch rabbits.
And the mushrooms, where was
The
that?
mushrooms, believe me, they grow over fast, overnight, if it rains.
How did you know which were poisonous and which
I
weren't?
knew. Somehow they showed me, I knew. And there are lots of wild fruit growing there. It's a beautiful part of France. In fact, Henri's going to take me again, and I know exactly where I was. I've got it.
That's
in my
going to be
mind.
incredible.
Yeah. And I had to go to church, see. The worst thing is I sat in front in the catechism, and the priest used to say, you know, every child must be baptized, because if a child dies, is not baptized, you'll go to hell for eternity. And I knew I wasn't baptized, and I was terrified to die. You have no idea. Stories there. And we went to a little village school. There was one child of 5, another one of 6, another one of 9, all farmer children. And they were harvest. They used to go through the window, they used to escape. And the teacher was one for all, and he used to beat us with a ruler. It was horrible. And one day I went to the toilet and I had one of those, what do you call, on the dogs, what do you call them? Leech? Well, not
A lead?
No.
The chain.
Oh,
pull it.
what an insect.
What that sucks the
Yes,
dogs?
a leech.
Not a leech.
Tick.
A tick.
A tick. Oh no.
In my navel. Huge white thing like
Oh
that.
no.
I pulled it out. I mean, I could have got sick for that.
Tick bite fever.
Yeah, horrible. And when they were fighting, the underground used to fight a lot with the German army. They used to take us to a cave, give us a bit of food, blankets, and say, just stay until we fetch you. Poor Alma was terrified that, in a cave, can you imagine?
Yeah.
So I used to invent stories that it was beautiful. It is really beautiful. That, see, this is the fairy's house, and they look after us. You don't have to worry. We're fine. And he trusted me, I mean, he was a thin little boy.
Did your mom stay behind in the village, or did?
No, another
she come-
place.
another
Oh,
place,
she couldn't have
you
stayed.
separate, yeah, that's,
Totally in another place. Didn't know where.
but you knew she was somewhere.
I didn't know anything. I didn't.
She could have been anywhere because her father was
Yeah.
gone.
I didn't know
Yeah.
what happened to
Brothers
any
were
of
gone.
them. I was 10. And
2 years like that in the forest and the caves.
caves, forest, and actually the thing is, I was not unhappy because I was totally wild, like a goat. I used to climb the tree quicker than a monkey. And do you know? And I lived wild there, totally wild.
Free
These
away.
people- These people were horrible, actually. They came from Brittany, and they were not nice.
For the family that were supposed to be looking after you.
Yeah, they were looking after
Yeah.
us. They didn't know who we were,
Yeah.
really,
They were told by the underground to look after
Yeah,
you. They
it was
didn't
a
have choice.
son-in-law that was the head of the underground.
Yeah,
So they had to do it,
Yeah.
you see, because they were also in hiding.
yeah.
And that house was interesting.
What percentage of the underground were Jewish, and what were?
There was no such thing as a Jewish partisan. It was
So they
all
were fully
mixed.
integrated into.
Totally,
as a
but
French,
there were
as a-
lots of Jews.
There must have been, yeah.
Lots, because all those that escaped went into the underground,
Yeah.
like Michel. And, then, of course, 2 years later, when Marseille was liberated, he was fighting 3 days and 3 nights in a square in Marseille. And he was very well known. The French television wanted to make a movie, a documentary, but he refused because Leon and my sister didn't tell anybody they were Jews.
Yeah.
So he didn't want to disclose, to uncover them.
Yeah.
And he refused. But you know, it's interesting what actually what the results, you know, even when the family was reunited after the war, it wasn't fine. That's where trouble started, where hardship was terrible.
But I want to know.
The poverty after the war.
Terrible, terrible for me, terrible.
But I want to know how. So you were in the mountains.
Yeah.
And can you tell us how you met up with your mother and your sister?
Afterwards.
Yeah. But how did you meet up with them?
Afterwards, they brought us together.
Oh.
They brought us together when it was liberated. It was no more, you see. And I remember when the Americans arrived in the town, you know, they were throwing chewing gum and chocolate, everybody kissing, like in the movies. It's
Yeah.
real. It's absolutely real. I've never had a chewing gum ever since because they were horrible.
Yeah.
But you know what I wrote there? Fears that I've always had, fear of being caught, fear of hunger, because my house is always packed with food. I've got a problem, serious problem, and fear of loving too much.
In case you lose it.
Yeah. The losses, there were lots of losses, loss of family, loss of childhood and innocence, loss of stability and security, loss of trust, I don't trust, betrayed too many times, and loss of confidence. I've never felt confident because my mother didn't believe in saying, you are pretty, you are clever, anything. No, she never said anything. She just had to say, you have to make it. You have to do the best. Because you knew that was the only way out. And when coming in Cape Town, that was again loss of family, all over again. Because don't forget, my mother was behind and everybody else. Loss of friends, all my friends, loss of country, language, culture, customs, and of course my brother who died at 20. Huh?
The little one that you looked after.
Yeah, and survival instinct, because I had tremendous survival instinct. Understand how strong it is necessary to survive. Self-reliance, believe me, I rely on myself. I had to look after myself and couldn't rely on others to look after. And survival. I've had many illnesses, as you know. Always had to survive, do the best. I had to be the best teacher at Herzliya. Wherever I taught, I just came out with letters. These are my testimonies in the colleges, in the German school and all that. But I never trusted myself, see. And trust on whom to trust. I can feel when people are sincere or not. I can feel I've got another instinct, like a dog. I know. And I don't give myself immediately into a relationship. I'm holding back, which is something that is a result of that, of course. I know that there are irrational thoughts that come from a traumatized child. Okay. I recognize all these things. That's why I don't need a psychologist. I know that I overbuy food. I throw away because it rots, but I've got to have. I cannot see anybody being hungry. I keep on saying, Alida, have you got enough food? Have you got enough food for supper? Have you got enough food for the weekend? The peacock I feed? And I cannot queue for a buffet dinner, ever. I will not eat at the wedding. And I have a motto, is never give up, ever.
That's why you survived.
That's why I survived. A strong instinct. It's totally, stories of miracles that, first of all, when they didn't take my brothers, because Michel saved our lives through and through, I survived the train journey. I could have died because I was very ill. My brothers escaped deportation. Leaving the camp, how that man, okay, so finding shelter with these Italian people. Beginning, my sister-in-law visiting the apartment, finding place for my mother, my brother and myself. I told you that it was so cold, I put my feet in the fireplace. A log fell, my foot burnt me to the bone. My left foot, I've still got the mark. And the farmers next door said, if the dog licks it, you're saved, because it went rotting. And the dog licked, and my foot was fine. No doctors or anything.
Amazing.
I could have had finished my leg.
Yeah.
The one thing you were saying as the battery went off was that one of the miracles was the guy turning over the paper.
Of course, that was a tremendous miracle.
Remember it?
Tremendous miracle. Because if he didn't do that, I wouldn't be here to tell you.
Yeah.
Because they went straight.
Was he German?
No.
French?
French.
Amazing.
And don't forget that the French were those that did all the German dirty work. The Germans didn't do it. They couldn't have done it without the French.
So they were collaborators.
That's right. They were. And afterwards, after the war, my mother took me, not Armand, me every day to the station. I hate station, you can't believe. For me, it's terrible. It's saying goodbye and never seeing people again. Every day we saw those inmates from the camps coming down, and my mother thought my father would come, and they were so frightening. And one girl I knew they had done experiments on her, and she died. She was my sister's best friend, and she died very shortly after. She looked terrible. Cecile, I remember her name. And I said to my mother, if Daddy comes down like that, I'll hide in the toilet. I don't want to see anybody like that. And
were these people that returned from the camps after they were liberated?
That's right. And they had been in hospital already treated, but you should have seen what they looked like. It was bad. So going day after day after day, it was like taking a knife and for
Going to the station every day.
Every day. I was about then 12, and I tell you, I worked hard with bursary, and I managed to get the tops. I had a music education, top music education. I had the top classes because I was determined, but my mother had nothing when we arrived in Marseille. And she went to the Haute to ask, I went with her to ask for help, and the woman said to her, your children are too healthy, we won't give you anything. And she lost it. And I was so ashamed to see my mother going crazy. That I never ever give to Jewish organization, ever. I give to people, direct, but never to organization. Because these people received from America rooms full of food, and they took it themselves.
Oh, that's terrible.
And they
She was
didn't give,
desperate.
and they didn't give, and for my mother, so proud, to go and beg for help. She never got any help whatsoever. I even had paper, now, the card, but she never got help. It was quite a hard time. Never had money for anything. I had one dress, and my mother adored movies. So one night she said, we're going to the movies. I said, but you've washed my dress. She says, no problem. You wear your pajamas and your coat. And we went to the movies. Look, she was 43 when they took my father. She was young. So really it was a big struggle after the war, believe me.
Well, maybe that's when we must start the next time.
And Michelle,
Michelle, of course,
you were reunited with him, and
yeah, with everybody. Leon, Michelle, my sister was here in. She
in the
crossed.
underground. Yeah.
She crossed France on foot to deliver messages. And one day she said she was in the bus and she heard two Germans say, Edisha knows.
To her.
Talking
about
amongst, talking about her. So, you know, she took the next stop she went to. Another time, and it doesn't matter, we can say it again, another time she was carrying a suitcase full of arms and papers, and she was arrested. And they said, what are you carrying? She said, my clothes. She had wrapped all the arms and everything, and they didn't open, they didn't search. If they had searched her,
I was killed her.
she would have been dead. So you lived continuous fear, all of us. All of us. But I don't think we're that crazy, are we?
You're unbelievable.
Unbelievable
We-
that you can still sit here and talk and all that you've accomplished since then.
Well, I've accomplished nothing.
No,
I
you
lived.
haven't.
No, you
The only thing you've accomplished as well now, being truthful to yourself that you don't believe in yourself by saying that statement.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't
But,
believe in myself.
believe me, you.
I don't. But because I do all that because I believe in a mission. You see, I'm not religious at all, but I believe in God, and I'm proud of being a Jew, and nobody can say anything because my father was a proud Jew and a proud who he was.
Yeah, and a proud Frenchman.
And the proud Frenchman. Yeah, they integrated beautifully. And you know, my great grandfather, the family were bankers in Vienna.
In Vienna.